The Mysterious Invitation. The maintenance shift at Nexus 7 always ran late on Fridays, and tonight was no exception. Ethan Wade wiped the grease from his hands, staring at the quantum drive housing he'd just reassembled. The station hummed around him with the constant white noise of recycled air and distant machinery, a symphony he'd grown accustomed to over the past year. Another successful repair, he muttered to himself, logging the work into his datapad. The screen's blue glow illuminated his tired face as he made his way through the dimly lit corridors toward the residential section. Most of the crew had retired hours ago, leaving the hallways empty except for the occasional service drone gliding past on its programmed route. His quarters were in Section D, a quieter part of the station reserved for long-term personnel. He'd grown to appreciate the solitude, though sometimes the silence felt heavy. The door to his room slid open with a soft hiss, and he stepped inside, already thinking about the hot shower waiting for him. But something stopped him. A figure stood in the corridor just beyond his doorway, partially obscured by shadows. Ethan's heart jumped, his hand instinctively moving toward the emergency comm on his belt. Then she stepped into the light, and his breath caught. Nyla, his neighbor from 3 doors down. Her skin was a deep purple that seemed to absorb and reflect the corridor's dim lighting simultaneously, creating an almost ethereal glow. Her hair, darker than the space beyond the station's viewports, fell in waves past her shoulders. She wore simple quarters clothing, but on her, everything looked elegant. Her eyes, large and luminous with flecks of silver, fixed on him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. "Ethan Wade," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the air seem to vibrate. "I hope I haven't startled you." "Nyla," he managed, trying to sound casual despite his racing heart. They'd exchanged pleasantries in passing, but she'd always seemed reserved, almost withdrawn. "Is everything all right? Do you need something repaired?" A smile played at the corners of her lips. In a manner of speaking, she glanced down the corridor as if checking for observers. Then she stepped closer. Her presence seemed to charge the space between them, and Ethan caught her scent, something like ozone mixed with an exotic flower he couldn't name. "I have a request," she continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "It may seem unusual, but I hope you'll consider it." Ethan nodded, unable to look away from those mesmerizing eyes. "What kind of request?" Nyla's fingers twisted together, a gesture that seemed surprisingly human in its nervousness. "Come to my quarters tonight, after midnight when the station enters sleep cycle and the corridors are empty." She paused, meeting his gaze directly. "I need to show you something important." Questions flooded Ethan's mind. Why the secrecy? Why him? Why midnight? But what came out of his mouth was simply, "Okay." Relief washed across her features, and for a moment, her luminous quality seemed to intensify. "Thank you," she breathed. "Please don't mention this to anyone. The fewer who know, the better." She reached out and her fingers brushed his forearm. The touch sent a tingling sensation up his arm, like gentle electricity dancing across his skin. Then she was gone, moving down the corridor with a grace that made her seem to glide rather than walk. Ethan stood frozen, staring after her until she disappeared around the corner. His arm still tingled where she had touched him. Back in his quarters, Ethan found sleep impossible. His mind raced with possibilities. What could Nyla want to show him? Why the secrecy? The Xylothians were known throughout the station as a private species, preferring solitude to the boisterous gatherings humans and other species enjoyed. But this seemed like something more. He'd noticed her before, of course. How could he not? She moved through the station like a living piece of art. Her purple skin and graceful movements drew the eye, but they'd never had more than brief conversations, usually about station protocols or shared amenities. Now she wanted him in her quarters, at midnight, in secret. Ethan glanced at his chronometer. 2300 hours. One more hour to wait. He paced his small living space, showered, changed into clean clothes, and tried to read a technical manual. None of it helped. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. When his chronometer finally read midnight, Ethan took a deep breath and stepped into the corridor. The station's sleep cycle had indeed kicked in, dimming the lights to their lowest setting. Emergency strips along the floor provided just enough illumination to navigate. The silence was profound, broken only by the ever-present hum of life support. 3 doors down. He'd counted them 100 times. Nyla's quarters sat unchanged, the designation panel glowing softly beside the entrance. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What was he walking into? Before he could second-guess himself, the door slid open. Nyla stood in the doorway, backlit by a soft purple glow that emanated from somewhere within her quarters. She'd changed into something flowing, a garment that seemed to move with its own subtle currents. Her eyes found his, and that same intense connection from earlier flooded back. "You came," she said softly, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. "I said I would," Ethan replied. She stepped aside, gesturing him in. "Then please enter." Her voice dropped to that harmonious whisper again. "And welcome to my world." Behind closed doors. The door sealed behind Ethan with a soft hiss, and he found himself standing in a space that bore no resemblance to standard station quarters. The air felt different here, charged with something he couldn't quite identify, and the temperature was several degrees warmer than the corridors. "This is," he began, then stopped, searching for words that could capture what he was seeing. "Not what you expected," Nyla finished for him, amusement coloring her tone. The room glowed with bioluminescent plants he'd never seen before, their leaves pulsing gently with inner light. Blues, purples, and soft greens created a living constellation across every surface. Crystalline formations grew from carefully arranged containers, refracting the plant light into dancing patterns across the walls. A low table sat in the center, surrounded by cushions that looked impossibly soft. The entire space felt alive, breathing. "I've spent months making it feel like home," Nyla explained, moving toward the table with that fluid grace. "Station quarters are so sterile, so cold. I needed reminders of Xyloth." She gestured for him to sit. "Please, make yourself comfortable." Ethan lowered himself onto one of the cushions, finding it even softer than it appeared. Nyla settled across from him, the table between them. On its surface sat a crystalline decanter filled with liquid that seemed to shift colors in the plant light, and two delicate glasses that looked like they'd been grown rather than manufactured. "I should explain why I asked you here," Nyla said, her fingers tracing patterns on the table's edge. "It's about trust and understanding. And," she paused, seeming to gather courage, "loneliness." Ethan leaned forward. "You're lonely? But there are other Xylothians on the station." "3 others," Nyla confirmed, "and all older than my mother would be. They see me as a child, though I've seen 32 cycles. They speak to me with condescension, as if my feelings and thoughts are somehow less valid because of my age." Her luminous eyes met his. "Do you know what that's like? To be surrounded by your own kind and still feel utterly alone?" Something in Ethan's chest tightened. "Actually, yes, I do. My family didn't understand why I wanted to leave Earth, why I needed to be out here among the stars. They thought I was running away from something. Maybe I was, running towards something I couldn't name." Nyla's expression softened. "That's why I've been watching you, Ethan Wade. You move through the station with purpose, but also with wonder. I've seen you stop at the observation deck viewports, staring at the stars like they hold secrets you're desperate to learn. You're searching for connection, just as I am." She poured the shifting liquid into both glasses, and their fingers brushed. The same electric sensation from earlier danced across his skin, stronger this time. "What is this?" he asked, examining the drink. "Starflower wine from Xyloth. I've checked the biochemical compatibility charts. Human physiology can process it safely." She raised her glass. "On my world, we share this when we want to open our hearts to someone, to speak truths we normally keep hidden." Ethan touched his glass to hers, producing a musical chime. He sipped cautiously. The wine tasted like honey mixed with something electric, warm going down but leaving a cool sensation in its wake. "That's incredible."
Now we talk, Nyla said, settling back into her cushions. Tell me, Ethan Wade, what brought you to Nexus 7? What drives a human engineer to spend his days among aliens, fixing machines in the void between stars? The wine seemed to loosen something in Ethan's chest. I wanted to matter, he admitted. On Earth, I was just another technician, another pair of hands. Out here, the work means something. Every repair keeps people alive, keeps this fragile bubble of civilization functioning in the hostile dark. He met her gaze. And I wanted to understand. I wanted to know how other species think, how they create, how they love. That last word hung in the air between them. Nyla's eyes widened slightly, and color seemed to deepen across her cheeks. Love, she repeated, softly. An interesting thing to wonder about. Your turn, Ethan said, his voice rougher than intended. Why are you really here? A Xylothian of your obvious education and grace, stuck on a remote research station? Nyla's fingers tightened around her glass. I'm here because I refused an arranged bonding, she said quietly. My family is prominent on Xyloth, and they had selected a suitable mate for me. Someone appropriate, someone safe, she laughed with no humor. Someone I felt nothing for. They sent me here as punishment, hoping isolation would make me compliant. I'm sorry, Ethan said, meaning it. Don't be, Nyla replied, and now her smile reached her eyes. Because being here led to you. She set down her glass and moved around the table, settling onto the cushion beside him. The proximity made Ethan's pulse race. I've watched you for weeks, Ethan. Studied how you work, how you interact with others. I've listened to your voice through the walls when you talk to yourself while reading the technical manuals. She laughed softly. You narrate the technical manuals out loud, did you know that? Ethan felt heat rise in his face. I didn't realize the walls were so thin. They're not, Nyla admitted. Xylothian hearing is more sensitive than human. Her hand moved to rest near his on the cushion, not quite touching. I know this is forward by your standards, but my people believe in honesty. We don't play games with attraction. Attraction, he said. Yes, Nyla said simply, her luminous eyes holding his. I'm drawn to you, Ethan Wade, to your curiosity, your kindness, the way you see beauty in quantum mechanics and star formations. She moved closer, and he could feel the warmth radiating from her. I asked you here because I wanted to know if you felt it too, this connection between us. I feel it, he managed, his voice barely above a whisper.
Crossing boundaries. Nyla's hand finally closed the distance, her fingers intertwining with Ethan's. The contact sent warmth flooding through him, different from before, deeper and more intoxicating than the starflower wine. Her skin felt smooth and cool, like polished stone that had been resting in shade. But where they touched, heat bloomed. On Xyloth, she said softly, we have a tradition called the resonance. Her free hand gestured to the bioluminescent plants around them, which seemed to pulse brighter in response to her emotion. When two souls recognize each other, they share their light. It's how we court, how we discover if a bond is possible. How does it work? Ethan asked, acutely aware of how close she was, how the purple glow of her skin seemed to intensify with each passing moment. Like this, Nyla whispered. She placed her palm against his chest, directly over his heart. Her eyes closed, and suddenly the room transformed. The plants flared brilliant violet, casting everything in shades of twilight. Ethan felt something flowing from her touch, not quite physical, but undeniably real. It was like music without sound, warmth without heat, a sensation that made every nerve in his body sing. What is that? He breathed, though he didn't want her to stop. My essence, Nyla replied, opening her eyes. They glowed now, silver flecks swirling like distant galaxies. I'm letting you feel what I feel, the truth of my emotions, unfiltered by words or gestures. Her voice dropped to barely audible. I'm showing you my heart. The sensation intensified, and Ethan understood. He felt her loneliness, vast and deep as the space between stars, her longing for connection, for someone who saw past her otherness, her fascination with him, growing over weeks of stolen glances and overheard conversations, and underneath it all, a current of attraction so strong it made him dizzy. Nyla, he managed, covering her hand with his. I can feel it. All of it. Then you know I'm not playing games. You know this is real. Instead of answering with words, Ethan drew her closer. His hand slid to the back of her neck, fingers tangling in her silken hair, and he kissed her. The moment their lips met, the bioluminescent plants exploded with light, bathing the room in radiant purple. Nyla made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sigh, melting against him. She tasted like the starflower wine, sweet and electric. Her lips were soft and cool, but they warmed under his. Her hand slid up his chest to his shoulders, pulling him closer with surprising strength. The kiss deepened, and Ethan felt that resonance intensify, as if their bodies were finding a frequency they could share. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nyla's entire form seemed to glow from within. In all my studies of humans, I never read that kissing could feel like that. That wasn't just human kissing. That was us. Nyla laughed, was breathless and joyful. She shifted, moving fully into his lap, her arms wrapping around his neck. I need to tell you something, she murmured against his ear. What I said about being sent here as punishment, that was only part of the truth. Ethan's hands settled on her waist, spanning the curve of her hips through the flowing fabric. What's the rest? I volunteered to come to Nexus 7, Niall admitted, pulling back to look at him. I'd heard there was a human engineer here, someone young and brilliant who'd made breakthroughs in cross-species technological integration. I read your papers, every single one. I wanted to meet you, to know if the mind that wrote those beautiful equations could be equally beautiful in person. Ethan stared at her, processing this revelation. You came here for me, specifically? I came here for the possibility of you. I didn't know if you'd be interested, if you'd even notice me. But I had to try. She smiled, and it transformed her entire face. My people may value logic, but we also believe in following our instincts, and everything in me said you were worth crossing the galaxy to find. Something fierce and protective surged in Ethan's chest. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. I noticed you the day you arrived, he confessed. You were in the commissary and you laughed at something another Xylothian said. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I went back to that commissary every day for 2 weeks, hoping to hear it again. Nyla's eyes widened. You did? I did, Ethan confirmed. But you always seemed so distant, so untouchable. I convinced myself you'd never be interested in a human. His laugh was self-deprecating. Turns out, I was an idiot. Not an idiot, Nyla said, kissing him again softer this time. Just cautious. There's wisdom in that. But we've been cautious long enough, don't you think? Her hand slid under his shirt, palms cool against his heated skin. Ethan sucked in a breath at the contact. Everywhere she touched, that electric sensation followed, making his nerve endings feel hypersensitive. Nyla, he groaned as her fingers traced the muscles of his back. Too much? She asked, but there was mischief in her tone. She knew exactly what she was doing. Not nearly enough, he replied. He stood, lifting her with him. Nyla wrapped her legs around his waist with a delighted laugh, her dress pooling around them. Where's your bedroom? Through there, Nyla pointed to an archway draped with luminescent vines. He carried her through, finding a space even more intimate than the main room. The bed was large and low, covered in fabrics that shimmered like captured starlight. More bioluminescent plants created pools of soft light,
and the walls seemed to pulse gently as if breathing. He set Nyla down on the edge of the bed, and she looked up at him with trust and desire mingling in her expression. "I should tell you," she said as he knelt before her, "Xylothian physiology is similar enough to human that we're compatible, but there are differences. When we're aroused, we phosphoresce. It's involuntary." "It's beautiful," he said honestly, watching the pattern swirl across her arms and shoulders. "You're beautiful." Nyla reached for him, pulling him onto the bed beside her. "Show me," she whispered. "Show me how humans love."
Dawn complications. Morning came too quickly, announced by the station's artificial dawn cycle that gradually brightened the corridor lights. Ethan woke to find Nyla curled against him, her purple skin still faintly luminescent in the dim room. Her head rested on his chest, one hand splayed over his heart. The bioluminescent plants had dimmed to barely visible glows, as if they too were resting. He didn't want to move, didn't want to break the perfection of this moment, but reality pressed in with the growing light. They'd crossed a line last night, one that station protocols explicitly warned against. Fraternization between species required documentation, psychological evaluations, approval from both parties' cultural liaisons. The paperwork alone could take months. Nyla stirred, her eyes opening slowly. When she focused on him, a smile spread across her face. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice still rough with sleep. "Morning," Ethan replied, brushing hair from her face. "We need to talk about what happens next." The smile faded slightly. "I know," she said, sitting up. The sheet pooled around her waist, and Ethan forced himself to focus. Station protocols, Protocol Gamma 7, subsection 12. No intimate relationships between species without prior authorization. "You've memorized it too," Ethan said, not surprised. "I had to know what we were risking," Nyla admitted. She took his hand, threading their fingers together. "Ethan, I need to tell you something else, something I should have mentioned last night." Dread coiled in his stomach. "What?" "I'm not just a researcher," Nyla said quietly. "I'm a cultural ambassador. My assignment here ends in 6 days. I'm scheduled to return to Xyloth." The words hit like a physical blow. 6 days, Ethan repeated numbly. "You've known this whole time?" "Yes," Nyla's voice broke slightly. "I'm sorry. I should have told you before last night. But I was selfish. I wanted one perfect moment before reality intruded." Ethan pulled away, standing and reaching for his clothes. Anger and hurt warred in his chest. So what was this? A vacation fling? Something to remember while you're back home? "No." Nyla was on her feet instantly, catching his arm. "Ethan, please, it's nothing like that. I didn't plan for this to happen, for you to become so important so quickly." Tears gathered in her luminous eyes. "I thought I could meet you, satisfy my curiosity, and leave. But now—" The station-wide alert cut her off, a klaxon that made them both freeze. "All personnel, report to duty stations immediately," the automated voice announced. "Repeat, all personnel to duty stations." They stared at each other, the moment shattered. "I have to go," Ethan said, finishing dressing with shaking hands. "Ethan, wait," Nyla pleaded, but he was already at the door. 6 days, Ethan said without looking back. "You have 6 days to figure out what you really want." Then he was gone, leaving her standing alone among the dimming bioluminescent plants. The choice. The priority communication turned out to be a false alarm, a system glitch that took all of 30 minutes to resolve. But by then, Ethan had retreated to the maintenance bay, throwing himself into work he didn't need to do. His hands moved automatically through familiar tasks while his mind churned. 6 days. She was leaving in 6 days. He'd been a fool to think one night could change anything. She was an ambassador,
probably had obligations on her home world, maybe even that arranged bonding waiting for her. And he was just a station engineer, easily replaced, easily forgotten. "You're torquing that connector way too tight." Ethan spun to find Nyla standing in the maintenance bay doorway. She changed into her official ambassador robes, deep purple fabric embroidered with silver that caught the harsh maintenance lighting. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her spine was straight, her shoulders back. "What are you doing here?" Ethan asked, setting down his tools. "Making a choice. And hoping you'll make a choice too." She stopped in front of him, close enough to touch, but not reaching out. "You were right to be angry. I should have told you from the beginning. But Ethan, please understand. I never expected to feel this way. I've had relationships before, even thought I loved once. But what happened between us last night, that was the resonance. True resonance, not just attraction. It happens maybe once in a Xylothian's lifetime, if they're fortunate." My heart hammered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I reported the resonance to my superiors this morning. I told them I found my bondmate, and that he's human. I have formally requested an extension of my assignment here, and I petitioned for you to be granted diplomatic status as my chosen partner." The words didn't process at first. "What did you do?" "I am offering you a life with me. Not just here, but everywhere. Xyloth, Earth, wherever our duties take us. As my bondmate, you'd be entitled to live and work on my homeworld. You could study our technology, collaborate with our engineers, bridge the gap between our species." Her grip tightened. "But more than that, you'd be with me. Every day, every night. We'd build something real together, something that crosses the spaces between worlds." Ethan stared at her, barely breathing. "Your family, the arranged bonding?" "My family will adjust or they won't," Nyla said firmly. "I'm done living for their expectations. I'm choosing my own path. And I'm choosing you." Vulnerability crept into her expression. "If you'll have me." "If you'll have me," Ethan repeated, then laughed, the sound breaking free from the tightness in his chest. "Nyla, I've been half in love with you for months. Last night just made it complete." Relief flooded her face. "Then you'll consider it? The bonding, the diplomatic status, all of it?" Instead of answering, Ethan pulled her close and kissed her. The maintenance bay's harsh lights seemed to soften, and I could have sworn he saw that purple glow beginning to emanate from her skin again. When they parted, Nyla was smiling through tears. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes to everything," Ethan confirmed. "To Xyloth, to diplomatic status, to building a life together." He touched his forehead to hers. "To you. Always." "Then we have work to do," Nyla said, her practical side reasserting itself. "The paperwork alone will take days, and we'll need to submit to the psychological evaluations Protocol Gamma 7 requires." "I know," Ethan interrupted with a grin. "I memorized it too, remember?" Nyla laughed, that beautiful sound he'd fallen for in the commissary months ago. "My clever engineer, what did I do to deserve you?" "You crossed a galaxy. You took a chance on a possibility, and you chose to be brave when it mattered most." They stood together in the maintenance bay, holding each other as the station hummed around them. 6 days until her original departure date. But those 6 days would now be spent preparing for a different journey, one they'd take together, into a future neither had imagined, but both were ready to embrace. "So," Nyla said after a long moment, "should I teach you about Xylothian bonding ceremonies first, or would you prefer to start with the language?" Ethan's laughter echoed through the bay. "Surprise me," he said. "Just keep surprising me." And as they left the maintenance bay hand in hand, the bioluminescent plants in Nyla's quarters across the station flared brilliant violet, celebrating a bond that proved love could bloom, even in the cold void between stars.